This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Fanalysts podcast. We are now in week 13, kind of, sort of. We're recording this on a Monday, but apparently week 13 doesn't start till Wednesday now. So, but welcome to our week 13 show. I guess by the time you hear this, it'll be week 13. Nick, how was your week 12?
Not over yet. This is the longest football week of my life. So fun fact, actually, I read this before, like literally minutes before we started recording this. Did you know that after Wednesday's game and then after Christmas Day, there will have been an NFL football game played on every single day of the week this year? Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Yeah, after the Steelers-Ravens Wednesday game. Yep.
And then there's a game on Friday, Christmas Day, that's played between, I believe, the Vikings and the Saints that will cover the Friday game. Yeah. So we will have watched a football game on every day of the week this year, which I don't know if that's ever happened.
COVID year.
Yeah.
It's 2020. Weird things have happened.
Yeah, I guess. How about that like monolith in the Utah desert that just like appeared randomly and then randomly disappeared? Aliens. That's the only way I can describe my fantasy week this week is aliens. Yeah, my fantasy week has not been great. My FanDuel week was not good at all. I think I won 60 cents.
Let's put it this way. I started Derek Carr in all three leagues.
Yeah, you didn't do well. You didn't do well. I made the foresight, and this was purely guessing. Mm-hmm. In one of the contests I ran in FanDuel, I decided to start Austin Eckler just out of pure speculation that, hey, maybe he breaks a big one. I know he's not going to get a ton of opportunity, but maybe he breaks a big one. And sure enough, he had a really good game. Mm-hmm. So I was pretty happy I did that. I wish I did it in other contests. I was only ballsy enough to do it in one. But I mean, I ran Justin Herbert, who wasn't spectacular in almost all contests.
Neither quarterback in that game was Justin Herbert or Josh Allen. It was weird.
I know. Very different than
this was a really weird quarterback week.
It was. Because Derek Carr, I expected to be excellent, was not great. It's just a weird week in general, because I also went Dalvin Cook all across the board, and he screwed me.
I had to massage my lineup so much to fit out Dalvin Cook in there.
Same. I didn't go over 6,000 at receiver. I went I'm pretty sure. No, I might have gone 6,400 on my high dollar receiver. Like I went so cheap at receiver so I could spend the 11 grand on Dalvin Cook thinking, all right, he's going to have another 3 touchdown performance.
Yep.
No, nothing. And do you know how badly it hurts to waste 11,000 FanDuel dollars on a guy to put up 10 points? That hurts, man.
You know what I wonder? I want to know how many people started players from that Saints-Broncos game, because that's by far the weirdest game I've ever seen.
Yes. The Broncos tried to have a coach play quarterback for them. That was denied by the NFL. I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, we had someone in our family FanDuel league who tried to, pull the smartest man in the room thing, and they started Hinton at quarterback, Broncos QB. Got them all of 13 yards passing and 2 interceptions.
Yep, 1 out of 9 for 13 yards and 2 picks. Yeah,
I have never seen a game where not a single receiver caught a football for the Broncos.
Not since like the
Broncos
40s,
had all of 1 catch.
Yeah,
and that was by Noah Fant. That was it. 1 catch. The whole team.
I mean, okay, the dude last played quarterback his freshman year for 2 games at Wake Forest. I mean, who expected him to do anything?
But then you look on the other side of the ball, the Saints only had 1 person with more than 1 catch, and that's Michael Thomas.
Taysom Hill was also terrible.
78 yards, no touchdowns.
Right, he was also terrible. It was an ugly game. Can
you really call that game football? Like, I don't know what that was.
I call it time machine football. It turned the clock back to 1939 is what it did, or 1935, whatever you want to call it. It turned the clock back.
It reminds me of this sketch. I don't know if you've seen this. Is a new show on Netflix called Auntie Donna's Fun House or something along those lines. It's like this.
Have not seen it.
It's this Australian comedy trio. And they did a sketch like football in the 1910s or whatever, and like the team would get a penalty. It was like 15-yard penalty, a fender goes off to war, and then like he packs his bags, just like jogging off the field.
Speaking of things on Netflix, have you seen Kevin Hart's new special?
I haven't seen his last two. I haven't seen this one or the one before it.
Apparently, I haven't either. Then I was so you haven't seen it then. All right, so I guess I can't really get your opinion on it if it's any good because it takes place like inside his house, doesn't it? And I
have no idea.
I'm pretty sure he does it like inside his house for an audience of some sort, and he's wearing pajamas or something. I don't know. It's weird. 2020 is a weird year. Weird year.
Now I'm curious what the hell is going on with that stuff.
I know, but to answer your question about how my fantasy week was, it's not over, and I'm very annoyed because if I win this week, I guarantee playoff spot in my yearly league. I lock it down. And I believe I guarantee the number 2 overall seed with a chance to still go after number 1. I actually inch a game closer. So right now I am holding on to a 41-point lead over my opponent, and he's got Ben Roethlisberger to go. I have Chris Boswell to go. Now you may say like, oh, that's enough points. Well, in this league, putting up a 40-point week for quarterback is something that happens on a weekly basis. So it is entirely possible for him to come back in this. But now I don't even know if this game's going to be played. And just the annoyance out of it, I have to wait an extra day now. I was already annoyed I had to wait until Tuesday to find out, but now I have to wait until Wednesday to find out if I win this week. I'm already like planning my next week's lineups, my next week FanDuel contest by Wednesday. I'm not still thinking about the previous week. It's over.
Is FanDuel not going to open their contest till Thursday now?
I have no idea. I honestly have no idea what their plan is. I would imagine. I mean, everything's pushed back a day, 2 days, even everything. It's not fun.
So weird. And I also wondered how is this going to affect the Steelers game? Have they announced how it's going to affect the Steelers Week 13 game?
Yes. So the Ravens game for next week has been pushed back. I want to say to Tuesday.
I think they have a triple header on Monday next week.
Yes, and then the Steelers game next week has been pushed back to Monday. They were playing Sunday, now they're playing Monday, and I think the Ravens were playing Monday, now they're playing Tuesday of next week. If I was just reading it, I think I'm remembering that right. That's how it's going to play out. But so this year is continuing to be a bother in pro football as well as college football. I mean, we've seen a lot of games get canceled. Hell, Ohio State may not be eligible for the Big Ten championship. They seriously, I'm not even joking you. If they miss one more game, like if they have another game canceled, they're not eligible for the Big Ten championship because of the Illinois game getting canceled this past weekend. They have no more room for a cancellation.
I think it's kind of on the Big Ten as a whole, not leaving room for flexibility.
Right. Well, they did. They technically did. They said you have to play, I think it's at least 5 games, and they will be below 5 games if they have another one go out. It's either 5 or 6. I can't remember. On an 8-game season. No, I think it's 6 because I think you can have 2 games canceled. Yes, you can have 2 games canceled. So if you have a third canceled, you're done. That's why Wisconsin season's done. They've already missed 3. But that's why it's kind of big news today that Michigan football has decided that they're going to put a pause on their season because of COVID concerns. Now, there's been no reports of positive tests as far as I know, as from what I read earlier today. No reports positive tests. They just have COVID concerns. Is this Michigan saying our season's terrible? It's done. I don't want to be embarrassed any longer. Let's just screw Ohio State season up.
Yep. That's exactly what it is. This is Jim Harbaugh's saving face. It's exactly what it is.
He wants to just come back next year as a lame duck.
Oh, God.
But no, I mean, this past week was frustrating for FanDuel. I like I said, I won 60 cents. It wasn't a good week at all for me. I did trust Derek Carr in one lineup. That didn't pan out. I also trusted Nelson Aguilar in one lineup. I don't believe that panned out either. I actually ran the Carr Aguilar stack as a cheap stack because I went Dalvin Cook as my running back and had to go cheap elsewhere. Because Nelson Aguilar has had like a couple of good weeks lately. I mean, I figured like, hey, maybe it's a good opportunity, but no, it backfired.
See, I thought like I started Carr in all 3 of these because that was my best way to make room for Dalvin Cook, and I'm like, I think Derek Carr is high upside. At the very least, he won't hurt me because he's going against Atlanta. He'll still probably get a couple touchdowns, at least 200 yards. Not a chance. That did not happen.
Well, I will tell you right now, I will never be starting Derek Carr again.
Oh, I agree with you 100% there.
He is off my list of anybody I would ever be willing to start.
He's in my permanent doghouse.
In fact, I may be willing to start Mitchell Trubisky over him at this point.
Oh.
He was better this week. Was he not?
Oh, God. Well, speaking of quarterbacks, it kind of leads me into my first topic I wanted to get into here. And that it is kind of the QB performances. And I wanted to gauge, in your opinion, which one was the most troubling? So I'm going to give you 4 quarterbacks. And just to preface this, they combined for a whopping 0 touchdowns. And these are all quarterbacks, besides maybe Jared Goff because of his matchup, that were pretty widely started.
So am I ranking these based on troubling factor?
No, I just want you to pick one. Say this is the one that I think is most troubling for fantasy owners and could signal something, a greater issue.
Okay.
So the first one is Derek Carr versus Atlanta. 215 yards, 4 turnovers, no touchdowns. You also have Kyler Murray against the Pats, 170 yards, no touchdowns, and a pick. You have Cam Newton against the Cardinals, who went for 84 yards and no touchdowns with 2 picks. And you have Jared Goff against the 49ers, who went 198 yards, no touchdowns, 3 turnovers. Any of those to you stick out as the most troubling QB fantasy performance of the week?
Well, I will say this. What is troubling is if you are trusting Derek Carr as your quarterback in fantasy, that's troubling right there. That's troubling.
Hey, it's called a value play, Nicholas.
Okay, same with Cam Newton. Neither one of those guys are really that great in terms of fantasy purposes this season. Cam Newton's had flashes. I think even Derek Carr's had a couple of splashes in the pan here and there, but I'll be honest with you. I don't really think the Kyler Murray situation is really all that troubling. And the reason is I straight up called this last week. I said, do not look Kyler Murray's way this week. It's not a solid matchup. He's got a tough matchup going on top of the fact that he's dealing with some shoulder issues. He had the shoulder injury the week prior and he played 3 quarters on it. So who knows what kind of condition it's in. I said, I didn't love the matchup to begin with. And I wasn't expecting big things out of him. Now, was I expecting him to be as bad as he was? No, but again, I wasn't liking Kyler Murray going into that week as it was. Jared Goff, same deal. I didn't like the matchup at all against the 49ers. I figured the 49ers were going to try to keep their offense on the field and try to run the ball as much as possible. Plus, their defense is going to get after them. They know they played this team twice a year. They've seen them quite a few times. They know how to stop Jared Goff. Yeah. I'll be honest with you,
Jared Goff is the one that doesn't worry me, I don't think at all, because of the fact that the Niners themselves are just a nightmare.
None of them, of the 2 relevant quarterbacks, none of them really concern me all that much. If you want to say which one's the most troubling, it's Cam Newton, just because of the fact that I really don't think he's somebody you can rely on for fantasy purposes for the rest of the season at all. I just don't think the team is good enough, and I don't think he's what he used to be. But in terms of Kyler Murray, like, it's troubling in the sense of, or it's troubling, but only in the sense of how bad is this shoulder, not is he able to rebound? Because if he's healthy, he's going to rebound, he's going to be successful, and he's going to play extremely well. He's one of the top quarterbacks, top 3 quarterbacks this season, and that's going to continue if he's healthy. So it's going to depend on that situation with that shoulder and if he's going to be 100% for the games coming up. I don't worry about Kyler Murray whatsoever. He's still got his weapons. He's still got his arm. He's still got his legs. I think he's going to bounce back and be just fine. But it is going to hinge on whether or not that shoulder's 100%.
I want to throw one more into the mix, and it's a guy we just talked about, and that is Taysom Hill. And the reason I want to throw him in is because of the contrast from his first game starting to his second game starting. Because in Taysom Hill's first game starting, he put up nearly 25 points. He threw for like 200-some yards against the Atlanta Falcons. And then you look at the Denver game, and he threw for 78 yards. Now, he still got it done on the ground, rushing for 2 touchdowns. But if you're a fantasy owner that was a Drew Brees owner and picked up Taysom Hill, the contrast between these 2 performances in terms of at least in the air, is that something that worries you at all, or are you comfortable sticking with Taysom Hill?
I'm not comfortable sticking with Taysom Hill at all. I don't think he's much of an air threat to begin with. I never thought he was, and I don't think he ever will be. I don't think he's a legitimate true quarterback. He's a running back masquerading or moonlighting as a quarterback right now. If the Saints are smart and they start to see that this is going to be an issue with Taysom Hill, that he's not able to throw the ball at with any kind of consistency, then they need to switch to Jameis Winston. And I think Sean Payton, albeit is very stubborn, I think he's a smart enough coach to see that and understand that, hey, this Taysom Hill experiment's not working right now. Maybe we need to go a different route. But Taysom Hill, it does concern me a little bit. I do think he's going to have fantasy relevance on a week-to-week basis as long as he's starting, just because of the fact that he's going to get a lot of opportunities to score some rushing touchdowns and gain some rushing yards to go with, maybe 100, 150, maybe even up to 200 passing yards in a game. But he likely couldn't. He's going to be a guy who may throw a pick or two. He's probably not going to throw too many passing touchdowns, so he's going to be saved by rushing touchdowns and his rushing ability, basically. But is that something you can rely on a week-to-week basis? Absolutely not.
Yeah, I agree with you. I view him as a matchup streaming option. He's matchup dependent in my eyes, because a good team, a good defense, I should say, can easily stop the Taysom Hill charade. It takes a bad defense to let a quarterback run that, basically run that QB option so effectively on you time after time again. So he's purely a matchup play in my mind. In terms of the other 4 quarterbacks mentioned, for me, I mean, I would say in terms of having effect on me for fantasy, I think the Derek Carr performance makes me say, okay, I'll never start Derek Carr again, because after this spot, I think I don't think he's just done in terms of fantasy. I think he's done as a Raiders quarterback. I mean, the Raiders offense has weapons. I mean, Henry Ruggs should be a weapon. Darren Waller has become one of the best tight ends in the league all of a sudden. They have Josh Jacobs in the backfield. I don't know why Derek Carr isn't better. I don't know why he hasn't gotten Henry Ruggs involved more. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't even think he should be the quarterback of that team anymore. But in terms of what I actually found the most troubling in general, it was, I know you called it in terms of the Kyler Murray thing. I thought it was going to be a better performance, and then Kyler Murray runs to another buzzsaw this week too. So the Kyler Murray train's worrying me, because we have to see if he can bounce back, because I'm not expecting him to have a good game this week either.
I mean, everybody's going to hit a bump in the road in a fantasy season when they have a couple of tough matchups. We're talking about him going up against 2 of the top 3 defenses giving up points to quarterbacks in the league. There's going to be rough matchups that every quarterback is going to play, regardless of how good they are. We've seen Russell Wilson struggle against good defenses. We've seen Josh Allen struggle against good defenses. So am I worried about Kyler Murray going forward? No, because as soon as that Rams game happens in week 13, I think he bounces back just fine against the Giants, if not excellently against the Giants. I think he has a really solid game against the Eagles, who are a bad defense against quarterbacks. And then come fantasy championship time, he faces the 49ers again, which is going to be a tough matchup. But regardless, I think there's a couple of good weeks where you can very comfortably trust Kyler Murray, a healthy Kyler Murray, in weeks 14 and 15. Just because, again, we're talking about the 3rd best quarterback in fantasy football right now. And just because he has a bad game against a really good defense does not mean it's time to jump off the bandwagon or jump off the train here. We can still roll with this train. But don't expect massive things from Kyler Murray over this past weekend, this upcoming week against the Rams. It's going to be slow going for the time being until week 14.
So he's not matchup proof. Let's put it that way.
I don't think anybody really is. And Russell Wilson was the one guy to prove that. Maybe Patrick Mahomes, but I think even he's had a game where he wasn't extremely stellar this year. Yeah. But Russell Wilson's even proven he's not matchup proof. I don't think any quarterback is in the NFL. This game's too hard.
Here's in general, in players in general, not just quarterbacks. Is there anyone I have one person. Is there anyone in the league you consider truly matchup proof in terms of fantasy?
I'll be honest with you. I think the one guy that I would consider to be matchup proof is Derrick Henry.
I agree. That's my guy too.
And it's because they finally, apparently Mike Vrabel got my memo from last year, which is let the big dog eat. Because they just feed him the football. Yeah. And they need to. That's how that freight train gets rolling.
And he runs all over really good rushing defense.
Exactly. You feed him the football and the big dog's going to eat. And he does.
He had Chicago, Indy, Baltimore, Indy, and he put up like a combined 400 some yards and 4 touchdowns on the 4 of them.
Exactly. And Andrew, tell me I was right last year saying they've learned they need to feed him the football, and that it's going to happen. He's going to be a freight train. You can't stop him. I was saying all along last year, they need to understand when you give him big time carries, when you give him big workload, he succeeds. And that's how they're going to win football games. And Tennessee finally learned that. And look at him now. You can't stop the guy.
Now, Speaking of troubling performances, though, I do want to get to one other guy. This is my second question of the week. Is Alvin Kamara still an RB1 with Taysom Hill under center? Because he's had one catch in his last 2 games, and he's a guy that's not as effective on the ground. Murray actually outcarried him this past game, 19-11 this week, and outperformed him. Is Alvin Kamara still an RB1 with Taysom Hill there?
I'll be honest with you. I don't know. If he is, it's a low-end RB1. And I'm going to be honest with you. I think Sean Payton's throwing that situation away and just trampling it into the ground. You have one of the most talented running backs in the NFL. You need to get him involved. This is a huge fault on the shoulders of Sean Payton here. And it's not just on Taysom Hill, because he's in a situation where he may not necessarily be comfortable. Alvin Kamara needs to be more involved in that offense. There is no excuse for Latavius Murray to outcarry Alvin Kamara on any day of the week. Alvin Kamara is still a far more talented runner than Latavius Murray, and you need to get him involved in the passing game where he is, in all honesty, most lethal. So this comes down to Sean Payton's coaching right here. He needs to get Alvin Kamara more involved in that offense. Otherwise, that Saints team will not succeed. That's arguably your best playmaker on the offensive side of the football right there. He needs to be the focal point.
No, I agree, and I say he's an RB2. I'll outright say it until Drew Brees comes back, unless there's some major,
or if Jameis Winston starts at quarterback. Winston starts quarterback, Alvin Kamara's value goes right back up to the top of the pecking order.
But with Taysom Hill there, unless there's some major game plan change, with Taysom Hill under center, he is an RB2. I mean, when was the last time we said that Alvin Kamara over the last 2 games had -2 receiving yards total?
Never. Literally never.
That just doesn't happen with Alvin Kamara. Taysom Hill, I feel like just the solid player he is, running that QB option and never really tossing to the halfback on that option. This is the type of player he is. It's robbed Kamara of so much of his fantasy value that it becomes a thing where, like, if you're a Kamara owner, you're debating where to start him over Latavius Murray. You're debating where to start him over other guys in your lineup. He's no longer an auto start in my mind.
I honestly agree with you. And Sean Payton really needs to drill into the head of Taysom Hill that, dude, this is the guy. You know, you are not better than him at running the football. I promise you. He is a better runner. You need to get him the football on these option plays. He's going to be available and make plays with his legs. It doesn't. You can't just have it rely on your shoulders. Otherwise, we will not be successful. So Sean Payton really needs Taysom Hill to take a step back on these option plays and give the ball to Alvin Kamara and let him do work. It's a necessity for the Saints offense to successfully run at this point. It runs through Alvin Kamara. It runs through Michael Thomas. It does not run through Taysom Hill.
Yeah.
If I'm Sean Payton, I'm making a quarterback change at this point, personally.
I agree. But he's won both his games, so
I understand. But you can think defense for the second game. And the fact that the Broncos literally had a guy who started last in high school.
You could think defense for the first game, too. It was Atlanta.
Yeah, that too.
But and this leads me to part 2 of that question. Drew Brees, they're looking at week 15 that he could come back. No guarantee, but he could be back week 15. That being said, are you holding Kamara for fantasy playoff purposes, or are you getting rid of him? Are you trading him?
Is that really even a question? Of course I'm holding Alvin Kamara. I'm not giving up a guy who's a number 1 pick when I can still have him for fantasy playoffs. And I guarantee you I'm in that position.
Week 15 is what, round 2 of the fantasy? It's
round 1.
Week 15.
Okay, depends on your league, but yeah, in my league it's round 1 because only 4 teams make the playoffs. But
okay.
So in most leagues it is round 2, but absolutely I'm going to keep Alvin Kamara. I'm not giving anybody an opportunity to have him in the fantasy playoffs, because that essentially almost guarantees that lineup's going to win it when Drew Brees comes back. So yeah, I'm gonna ride with Alvin Kamara. If I have to bench him a game, or if I have to understand that, hey, maybe I need to hope that someone else performs at my RB2, or go through that route until week 15 comes along. But regardless, I'm trusting Alvin Kamara in the fantasy playoffs. That is my guy. I got here with him. I'm going to continue to ride him. There's no way I'm trading him right now.
For me, I'm looking at the matchups that he has for weeks 15, 16. He has Kansas City and Minnesota. They're not like fantastic matchups for running backs. They're also not terrible.
They're very middle of the road.
Yeah, for running backs. So they are very middle of the road. And when I think about it, like, for me, it really depends. If I'm selling Kamara, you're not getting RB1 value for him, but maybe you can get wide receiver 1 value for him. If you're a guy who needs wide receivers, if you can get a wide receiver 1 for Alvin Kamara, I make that move. Anything less, I stay put. Because, again, there's no guarantee. Like in the majority of leagues with Week 15 being round 2, there's no guarantee you even make it that far if you're playing without who was probably your first-round pick. So for that reason, I feel like you may be exposed a little bit in round 1 if you don't have an answer there, unless you have a solid guy to fill in for Kamara. But if you don't, I think it's a viable option to look to move on from him and just try to capitalize on that value and trade into a playoff team that actually is able to take the risk and hold him for the back end of the playoffs.
Again, there's no chance I'm trading Alvin Kamara. It doesn't matter what you give me.
Unless you're in a dynasty league, then hold on.
Yeah, but again, either way, there's no chance I'm trading Alvin Kamara because of the fact that he's the one who got me here. I'm going to trust him in the playoffs. Honestly, he's your number one. He's your number one pick. You almost have to roll with him regardless of what his outcomes are. He got you to where he is or where you are. You need to roll with him regardless. It is what it is, and it's very unfortunate that they don't know how to use him with Taysom Hill under center. But you got to roll with him and hope he gets you a touchdown here, and you weather the storm until Drew Brees comes back, or they switch to Jameis Winston. It's got to happen.
All right, let's say you got offered Keenan Allen for Alvin Kamara. Are you doing that trade?
Probably not. Depends on what my wide receiver situation is, but no, I don't think I would be.
Because Keenan Allen's got they're in playoffs: Atlanta, Raiders, and Broncos.
Cool. Again, it's I got here with Alvin Kamara. I'm going to run with it. Okay. It does depend on what my wide receiver situation is. If I'm desperate for wide receiver, I'm gonna look that way. Yeah. Because if I'm desperate for wide receiver, I probably have really good running backs.
But in a vacuum, you're not doing it.
No.
All right. You also had one.
I had 2 actually. 3 actually.
Oh, all right. Get to it.
My first one is Will Fuller came out today and announced that he has been suspended by the NFL for 6 games for violation of the league's substance
no wonder you're so damn good against the Lions.
Performance enhancement substance abuse or whatever it is. He dude's on roids.
He said he took like banned prescription medication.
Yeah, well, whatever. He's on roids. Mm-hmm. No wonder he's been so good lately. But what do fantasy owners do with the situation in Houston with Will Fuller? It's kind of a 2-part question. And part 2 of the question is Brandon Cooks now in the wide receiver 1 territory, taking over probably what is expected to be the number 1 wide receiver spot on that roster?
Well, if you have Will Fuller, unless you're in a dynasty league, you dump him. Obviously, he's done for the year for you.
He's done.
But yeah, if you either are lucky enough to have Brandon Cooks or... Well, yeah, if you're lucky enough to have Brandon Cooks, I think that he will begin to flirt with wide receiver 1 value. I think he's a solid high end wide receiver 2, like firmly, but I do believe that if the cards fall the right way for him, I think he could be a wide receiver 1 rest of the season for sure. Now, if you're a Will Fuller owner hoping to trade for Brandon Cooks, I think those cards are off the table. I don't think that's going to happen anymore. But yeah, I think I'll be comfortable saying low end wide receiver 1 for Brandon Cooks the rest of the season.
Now, what about guys?
Because they just caught Kenny Stills too, so like they depleted their wide receiver.
Well, now that raises the question of what about guys like Randall Cobb, who has shown flashes with Houston, but is that a guy that you can trust now to be a low end to mid tier or even high end wide receiver 2 with the Houston Texans? Now that Will Fuller's gone, a lot of targets there to go up for grabs.
Yeah, Cobb's on my flex radar. That's probably where I put him. You basically upgrade that whole receiving core because that's a huge chunk of targets, including the tight ends. That's a huge chunk of targets that have been vacated. Now,
just kidding. Randall Cobb is on the IR.
Oh, okay.
So I don't even know who their wide receivers are.
But I'm saying you upgrade the tight ends too. I worry about Deshaun Watson because I feel like his weapons are depleting by the minute. I mean, if you had said last year, all right, you got Deshaun Watson without Hopkins and Fuller, what do you think?
Ouch.
But that's the situation right now. So
okay, now here's a name that we've seen flirt with high-end flex play to low-end wide receiver 2 in the past, primarily last year. Kiki Kuti. Is that somebody that you were really targeting for the Texans as somebody that you can reliably insert into your lineup on a weekly basis?
Yes, he's a high end flex, low end RB2 for me, for sure.
All right. Next question. Has Justin Jefferson is Justin Jefferson now the guy in the Minnesota wide receiver core, stepping up in a big way with Adam Thielen out? And in all honesty, I believe he's actually outperformed Adam Thielen this season. Is he now the guy in Minnesota?
I still think the guy is Adam Thielen. You just got to look at who is drawing the heavy hitting quarterbacks from the opposition, and it still is Adam Thielen. So because he's getting, not like Justin Jefferson's getting respect for opposition, but because Adam Thielen is still the guy getting more attention from the opposing defenses, I would still think he's the guy. He's still the number 6 fantasy receiver on the season. So I definitely think that Justin Jefferson is a huge part of this offense. He's locked in your fantasy lineups for years to come. But while Thielen is there, unless we see a significant regression, I still think Thielen's the guy.
All righty. Final question. And I mean, I'll be honest with you, Justin Jefferson, albeit a really solid play week in and week out, he is still a little bit inconsistent, where Thielen tends to be a little bit more consistent. Granted, not as much this year, but he does have a lot more touchdowns, almost double the touchdowns that Justin Jefferson has. So that just says that Adam Thielen is a lot more reliable in the red zone, which means that that's something that you can rely on. Is Justin Jefferson the guy? I'm going to say depends on where you are on the football field. In between the 20s, I think he is the guy. But inside the 20s, no, it's Adam Thielen all day. And final question I have, is it time to hop back on the Kenyon Drake train and trust him going into the fantasy playoffs?
Oh, that's such dangerous territory. That is such dangerous territory. I don't see, like, every time I've tried to hop back on the Kenyon Drake train, I've gotten burned. But you look at his last 3 games. He had 2 touchdowns last game. He had a touchdown against Seattle. And he had 100 yards rushing against Buffalo. You look at his fantasy playoffs. I mean, he's got New York Giants, Philly, 2 favorable matchups.
Well, Philly's a tough matchup against running backs, but their defense isn't great either. Yeah.
But then week 16, you got the Niners. I don't think I'm hopping on the. I don't think I'm hopping on that train. There's 2 games. One game that I really like, and I think he can take advantage of the Philly game because of the game script. Part of that, I don't think I can hop on the Kenyon Drake train for playoffs. Now, I would be willing to sell high on him though if I'm the Kenyon Drake.
Well, it depends. Do you have a trade deadline or not?
A lot of leagues do about that.
Yeah. A lot of leagues
primarily DFS this year has made me forget about trade deadline.
Now, my one question. Now, let me do this.
Yeah.
Going through potential running backs that you could have on the same roster, who would you trust, Kenyon Drake or Antonio Gibson? This is rapid fire.
Antonio Gibson.
Kenyon Drake or Gio Bernard?
Kenyon Drake, because I feel like Joe Mixon's return's imminent.
Okay. Kenyon Drake or Zeke Elliott?
I'm going to go Zeke. I'm going to go Zeke because I like what I saw from him when in Andy Dalton's last game. Obviously, but then again, against this week, he sucked. So, you know what? No, I'll go Kenyon Drake. Kenyon Drake over Zeke.
Kenyon Drake or David Montgomery?
Kenyon Drake.
Ooh, even though David Montgomery's schedule looks pretty good coming up.
Does it for playoffs?
Lions, Texans, Vikings.
Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah. and then Jaguars in the championship week. Yeah. Dave Montgomery's schedule looks pretty solid.
I think you might have converted me. Okay. Dave Montgomery over Kenny Drake.
Let me think of some other ones that could be up there.
Rapid fire did give you time to look up schedules.
No, that's going to be it. That's all I got. But no, I'm kind of in the same boat. Like, I may look at Kenyon Drake in a matchup here and there, but I'll be honest with you. I'm really liking rolling with my duo of Dalvin Cook and Antonio Gibson and just continuing with those two because as heavy hitters, because I like my receiving core. I got 3 or 4 receivers that I can trust comfortably, especially with Brandon Cooks being upgraded as well. Got 4 real solid receivers, and I can only play 3 of them, including in the flex position. So Kenyon Drake still sits there as my RB3.
By the way, how have you not had a heart attack with the amount of times that Dalvin Cook has scared you with injury this season?
Because I have had Alexander Madison stashed away the entire year.
There you go.
And that's fucking like an experienced fantasy football player right there.
All right, we want to start the sits?
Let's do it. Quarterbacks this week. I'll take it away. My first start of the week quarterback is going to be Baker Mayfield going up against the Texans. Or sorry, not Texans.
You trust in the Baker man.
I'm trusting Bake Show. I'm trusting Half Baked. I'm gonna call him Half Baked. Trusting Half Baked.
Did you see that audio clip of him against I think it was Jacksonville this past week? Jacksonville did like the little defensive line shift over, and then like in the middle of like Baker's count, and in the middle of his count, he goes, "That was cute, guys."
Oh man, I love when players are mic'd up. It's fun. But or when the mic picks up player commentary. But Baker Mayfield going up against Titans. The Titans are fourth worst against quarterbacks in fantasy football this year. They give up a ton of points quarterbacks, which is kind of a far cry from what they were last year, because they were kind of more of a hot high-end defense last year. They've taken a big step back, and quarterbacks have put up big numbers. And we saw that connection finally happen with Jarvis Landry this past week, and I think that's going to continue this week with Jarvis Landry being a hot hand. Plus, teams are afraid of that backfield again with both Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt back there. It's so lethal. They have to stack up into the box, and that opens things wide open for Baker Mayfield to throw to his receivers out there.
Jarvis Landry finally exploded.
That's what I was saying. They finally had that connection last week, so I think it's going to continue this week. I think Baker Mayfield's got a shot for a really big upcoming game against Titans.
Yeah, I don't mind that one. I generally try to avoid Baker Mayfield.
Half-baked?
Half-baked, but I think that could be a good spot right there. My start of the week is Kirk Cousins against Jacksonville.
That's my second one.
Yep, because Jacksonville's pass defense has really imploded in recent weeks. If you look over the last 5 weeks, they're allowing an average of nearly 300 yards a game. 296, you want the exact number. But nearly 300 yards a game and 2.2 touchdowns per game. Couple that with the fact that Cousins has been on a tear the last 4 weeks, averaging 283 yards and 3 touchdowns per game, all while throwing only 1 pick during that entire span. And he should probably have Adam Thielen back for this one. I'm rolling with you like that this week.
I'm right there with you. The Vikings themselves have been on a tear. I believe they're on a 5-game winning streak right now. Yeah, with 3 of those games coming in the division.
It's like them and Chicago switch roles in the division,
right? And I called it at the beginning of the year. I think the Vikings were the team. I thought the Vikings were the team to beat in the NFC North, and we're finally starting to see that happen. This Vikings team, when it gets hot, it did. When they get hot, though, they're a scary team, and it's like a freight train right now. And I think that the Jags got another thing coming if they think they're going to be able to slow down the Kirk Cousins, that Vikings train. Sits of the week.
Oh, I got a couple more starts.
I got a talking point. I don't have a start, but I have a talking point. So go ahead and give me a start.
All right, this one, this is scary. But I think he's going to be so cheap that it might be worth it. Taysom Hill against Atlanta.
This is my talking point, and I say I don't like the matchup, and I'll give you my reasons. But go ahead and give me your reasons.
So yeah, I do recognize Atlanta after what they did Derek Carr. It might be a little bit scary, but let's look at the fact that they're allowing the second most rushing touchdowns per game to the QB position, which is where Taysom Hill gets the bulk of his production. Again, it's a really risky play, but it could pay dividends, especially considering he managed nearly 25 points against them 2 weeks ago, 25 fantasy points per game, fantasy points against them 2 weeks ago. So he's very proven that he could take advantage of him in that spot, and they've proven vulnerable against rushing QBs, which Taysom Hill is that's basically all he does. So it's a very risky play, but it could return pretty good value considering how cheap he'll probably be this week.
I don't really like the matchup there, and the reason is being the Falcons' run defense is actually really good. They're third best in fantasy football against the run, and that's pretty much all Taysom Hill does. And while it may have caught them a little bit off guard in what they were running with the RPOs and the way that they were game planning for it, but there's only so much you can do with Taysom Hill running the football out of taking the snaps and running with it. There's only so much you can do there, and I think the Falcons will come in a little bit better game planned and prepared and have more of a spy rushing stopping attack against Taysom Hill this week. And the way that their run defense has been all season long, I don't like the opportunity because he's not going to beat you through the air. If he's going to beat you, it's through the legs, and it's through his legs, and I don't think he's going to be able to take advantage of that this week. And yes, he's going to be cheap, and maybe you get 20 points because he's saved by a rushing touchdown or two. But again, is that really worth spending the money on him to get that type of value when you could look elsewhere in probably the same range in that dollar value. I would look at Ryan Fitzpatrick before I'd look at
my next guy
at Taysom Hill this week.
Yeah. But it is a very interesting nuance with Atlanta how they've suddenly become so good with the rushing defense, but for some reason they can't stop the run when it's the quarterback. Like it
may just be that teams are able to run the ball with the quarterback in the red zone. I mean, I don't know what they give up yardage wise at the quarterback position. But again,
I can tell you in a second.
Yeah, go ahead and figure that out. But I don't like the fact that Taysom Hill is basically a running back that just gets the snaps. That's all.
Yeah.
So and with the Falcons being as good as they are against the run, I don't love it.
So teams allowing the most, they are in the top 10. They're allowing 21.9 rushing yards per game.
To the quarterback position?
Yeah, there's 8 teams above them.
Top 10?
That are worse than them. Basically.
Okay, worse
they're the worst, the 10 worst, sorry. Top 10 worst. Okay.
But 21 rushing yards is not going to move the needle that much. So that tells you that the rushing touchdowns they're giving up are like 5-6 yard plays at the goal line type deal.
For context, the worst team against rushing, the team allowing most rushing yards per game to QBs is Philly at 32.2. That's for context. But yeah, the other guy, like you mentioned, Ryan Fitzpatrick, because since he's allowing 23 fantasy points per game to QBs, and people forget that Fitzpatrick, when he started the first 6 weeks of the season, he was the QB8 through that time span. So he was actually good. And he picked up right where he left off this past week, and he gets another nice matchup this week, and he's going to be cheap, and I don't see any reason why not. So Ryan Fitzpatrick is my third start of the week at QB.
Fitz magic is back. And I'm loving it because of the connection he has with a certain wide receiver that I will get into later.
Oh, yeah, same.
Switching over to sits this week, I've got Deshaun Watson going up against the Colts. The Colts are the 6th best against quarterbacks. That's a tough defense. Yeah. I know that Tennessee, I believe, beat them up this week, but regardless, I don't think that affects them at all. Deshaun Watson also losing his top target, and Will Fuller isn't going to help him at all. I think the Colts are going to be able to manhandle him. That offensive line is terrible. That running game is terrible. And that wide receiver core just took a big hit. So Deshaun Watson's going to be hit by a truck this week in the Colts defense.
Another guy that's running into a brick wall is Kyler Murray against the Rams. I don't think I need to remind anyone that the Rams are a nightmare matchup for QBs. If you look at the last 5 weeks, they've allowed a total of 3 touchdowns to the position. Murray could very well pull through. Let's be honest here. And he could give owners a good week because he's Kyler Murray. He finds ways to get things done unless you count last week. But I see no reason to risk it considering this team just held Russell Wilson to 0 touchdowns and 3 turnovers just 2 weeks ago. So if they could do that to Russell Wilson, imagine what they could do to Kyler Murray.
Just like I said, nobody's matchup proof at the quarterback position. That's true with Kyler Murray, and it's also true with my next of the week and Justin Herbert going up against the Patriots. They're 3rd best against quarterback position in the league. And they just seemingly play a low-scoring game every single week, which does not bode well, regardless of how good the QB plays on the other side of the ball. With this week, it'll be Justin Herbert. It just doesn't bode well for fantasy purposes. He may not turn the ball over a bunch, but he's not going to rack up a ton of yards. He's not going to rack up a ton of touchdowns. It's going to be a tough matchup for Herbert going up against Patriots. And I also think that with Eckler back, they may want to try to set the tone with the run and control the tempo in their game plan. So you may see a little bit taken away from Justin Herbert in the game plan just because of the presence of Austin Eckler there as well. So I don't like the Herbert play up against the Patriots, which sucks because my 2 quarterbacks are Kyler Murray and Justin Herbert. So I got to pick my poison this week.
Moving on to running backs.
Let's do it.
All right. My first running back start of the week, Josh Jacobs against the Jets. And I specifically want to highlight him because I made him my sit of the week last week. And I feel like I want to give him a shot again because I feel like he's a no-brainer start against the Jets. And it's the Jets. Don't be fooled by the recent run defense performance because it's the Jets. This kind of uptick in their run defense, it came against the likes of DeAndre Washington, Kalen Ballage, and that killer duo of Devin Singletary and Zach Moss in Buffalo. And also the duo that never
that was
gets
sarcasm,
the ball.
Right?
And also the duo that never gets the ball, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Le'Veon Bell. So, which is honestly a good duo of running backs. They just don't get the ball. Nope. So don't be scared off by Josh Jacobs' performance against the Falcons. We knew that was going to happen, remember.
Falcons good run D.
a lot of analysts for some reason made him a start of the week, but I don't see why.
I don't see why.
But yeah, play Josh Jacobs with confidence this week.
I like that matchup there. I'm going to roll with Miles Sanders going up against Packers.
As well.
They are the third worst defense against running backs, and it seems that every single week a running back torches the Packers for a bunch of yards and touchdowns. I believe who played the Packers this week?
David Montgomery just got
David Montgomery hit
David Montgomery's got 103 today.
103 yards this week. When's the last time David Montgomery had a 100-yard rushing game? That Bears offense is abysmal, and David Montgomery managed to put up 100 yards against Packers. I think Miles Sanders is going to have a little bit better of a performance than that. Probably gets in the end zone, breaks off a big one up against this Packers defense that just can't seem to stop anybody that runs the football.
Yeah, I'm right there with you with Miles Sanders in my start of the week as well. Like you said, they're allowing it's not just David Montgomery. They've allowed an average of 110.6 rushing yards per game to the running back position over the last 5 weeks. That's terrible. In fact, it's so terrible the only team worse is the Lions. But yeah, Miles Sanders is also my running back start of the week.
My next one is, someone I just mentioned, David Montgomery going up against the Lions. Ooh. Lions, in terms of fantasy purposes, give up the most points to running backs through this point in the season. And David Montgomery's coming off of a solid week this past week, putting up 100 yards against Packers, and he goes up against an even worse running defense in the Lions this week. Mm-hmm. Very good opportunity for him. He's going to get the work, and game flow dictates that he's probably going to get the ball a lot because the Lions can't put up points and the Bears, they can't either. But if they get ahead at all, they may never relinquish it because their defense is good and the Lions can't score. So you may see David Montgomery running the ball quite a bit this week.
My sit of the week, unless you want to start.
I do not.
Okay, my sit of the week is going to be Antonio Gibson against Pittsburgh. And
just
like Josh Jacobs was a start coming off a terrible performance, I'm making Gibson a sit coming off a monster performance. The thing is, he's probably taking all that momentum. I don't know if you remember the episode of Fresh Prince. Get that momentum over here and push me off this tree. Momentum. Anyway, so he may be taking that momentum full steam into a brick wall this week. Outside of a glaring outlier where they allowed 200 yards to Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, the Pittsburgh defense has actually been deadly against running backs. Because if you take out that outlier game, this team is only allowing 70 yards and half a touchdown per game to the position, which is scary. I don't like Antonio Gibson this week.
Much to my dismay, I don't either. He's also one of my sits of the week. The Pittsburgh defense is lethal and legit. Yeah. And honestly, game flow is going to take the ball out of Antonio Gibson's hands also. So I don't really see much opportunity for Antonio Gibson. I think J.D. McKissic could actually be a little bit of a sneaky play just because of game flow, where he may get a lot of opportunities and a lot of check down plays get through going his way. So if you're in a PPR league, J.D. McKissic may be a solid sneaky play. And also a cheap DFS play. He's not going to have a super high ceiling, but I think he guarantees you at least 10, 12 points. But anyways, Antonio Gibson very much has the floor taken out from underneath him. He can go straight up to an egg this week. He's got a very tough matchup against the Steelers. My next sit of the week, though, is Kenyon Drake going up against the Rams. Mm-hmm. I literally have mentioned just about everything about this Cardinals offense in this game, where I don't like Kyler Murray and I don't like Kenyon Drake. The Rams defense is brutal against other teams. They're just really good. Yeah. And the Cardinals and the Rams defense being fifth best in the league. Kenyon Drake also very inconsistent. I know he's coming off a big game, but I don't see him continuing that this week. And also, again, game flow may or may not take things out of it for him.
Mm-hmm. I agree. It's almost like you want to sit everyone on the Cardinals this week.
I kind of do.
Moving on to wide receivers. My start of the week is going to be Justin Jefferson against Jacksonville. The Jags have allowed a wide receiver to go for 100 yards in 7 straight weeks. I don't think I've ever seen that happen.
Seattle. What are they up to now? 12, 13, 14 100-yard pass catchers with like 3 within 5 yards?
I haven't actually looked to see what they've allowed the last couple of weeks. I'm kind of curious now. But with Jacksonville, in all honesty, it really could be Thielen or Jefferson this week. So I guess if you can afford them, go Thielen. But I always tend to lean value. So Jefferson is my start because of the value you could end up bringing if he's the guy that goes for 100. If you stack him with Cousins, this week, that's a really low cost stack that could end up paying dividends.
That is a lethal stack. To give you an idea of what the Eagles or the Seahawks are giving up tonight, Not a single pass catcher has over 32 yards for the Eagles. It's a 14-9 game. Who would have guessed that?
What in the world
I know.
is going on?
I don't know. Dallas Goedert is the only guy over 20 yards for the Eagles right now, and Richard Rodgers is the second most with 17. So Alshon Jeffrey is their leading wide receiver with 15 yards. So there goes our prediction of Travis Fulgham bouncing back in any way.
Yeah, Travis.
But
he's scaring me, man. Like, what the hell?
I think he's done. This was the matchup that I really needed to see it from him. And
why would you just go away with something that's been working well for you? I don't understand.
I don't know. Ask Carson Wentz that question, not me. But my start of the week is Terry McLaurin going up against the Steelers. Every single week we see at least one receiver go for big points up against the Steelers. They are fourth worst in the league. Yes, fourth worst in the league at giving up points to wide receivers. And Terry McLaurin is honestly one of those guys who may actually be close to matchup proof. He's a guy who continuously gets points week in and week out. Alex Smith loves to throw him the football.
He's the only receiving option on that offense.
Exactly. And that's why he gets points. And he's going to up against a bad Steelers secondary this upcoming week. I think there's good opportunity for Terry McLaurin this week up against what is a good defense. However, their secondary is not great. And also, I will say this, game flow probably dictates Terry McLaurin getting a lot of opportunity as well. You could see a really, really high catch game for him.
Devontae Parker is my next start of the week.
Same.
With Fitz back under center, Parker was targeted 14 times this past week and went for 119 yards against the Jets. He gets another terrible pass defense this week in Cincinnati. I roll him out due to his high floor with Fitzpatrick under center, and he'll pay off big if he finds the end zone.
Devontae Parker has been massive all season long when Ryan Fitzpatrick's been under center. And we only saw him dip down when Tua came in. But with Fitzmagic back underneath center, taking the snaps and throwing the football, I think Devontae Parker's immediately jumped up into high-end wide receiver 2 to low-end wide receiver 1 status with the ceiling of being a top 5 receiver on a week-in and week-out basis. I think Devontae Parker's got a great opportunity this upcoming week against a bad Cincy defense.
Yeah.
I do have one more start, actually.
Okay, go for it.
Allen Robinson going up against the Lions.
Ooh.
Lions secondary is beat up, banged up, and just bad. Allen Robinson, who seemingly gets open every single play, as long as Mitch Trubisky can actually get the football to him, he will put up points and will score. He scored twice this past week, and I think he's got a good opportunity to put up a couple touchdowns this upcoming week, a la Will Fuller, up against this Lions secondary that is just not good.
I can't disagree with that.
No, you really can't.
I hate starting. Well, I after the way I've been burned a couple of times by Allen Robinson and just seeing how poor his quality of targets are, I'm always scared to start Bears wide receivers. But when you talk about a defense like Detroit said, it's I don't hate it. Moving on to sits. My sit of the week is going to be DeAndre Hopkins against the Rams. The Rams have only allowed 2 100-yard receivers on the season, and they are Deebo Samuel and Cole Beasley of all people. But they've shut down the likes of Evans, Godwin, Metcalf, Lockett, Cooper, Lamb with Dak under center. Hopkins is going to have a rough go at it this week. If you go with the Murray Hopkins stack, you're really in for a long day. So Hopkins is my sit of the week.
That is, I have him as a buyer beware just because it's DeAndre Hopkins. It's basically a sit. And the reason is being he's going to be drawing Marcus Peters this week. Marcus Peters has been shutting down receivers all season long.
Yeah.
But my sit of the week is actually going to be Lions wide receivers up against the Bears. Bears are second best at giving up points to their second best defense when against wide receivers, and that's including Kenny Golladay. If he does come back, I don't know what his status is going into this week, but if Kenny Golladay comes back, I think that entire locker room, that team, it's just in shambles. I don't like any Lions players really moving forward at this point outside of one, and it may not be who you think. But Lions wide receivers this week, including Kenny Golladay, if he does play, I'd sit them all going up against the Chicago defense this week.
Moving on to tight ends?
I do have one more sit.
Oh, okay.
It's actually the Steelers wide receivers going up against Washington football team. I think there's a couple of reasons.
Straight week that one of us has recommended sit all Steelers wide receivers.
Yes. The Washington football team is actually a sneaky good secondary. They get to the passer quite a bit. I also think that game flow is going to take the ball out of their hands a little bit also. I think you're going to see them focus on the run and be able to keep ahead of that game. So I don't love the Steelers wide receivers going up this week.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Moving on to tight end. Jonnu Smith against Cleveland.
Yep, that's my number one.
The Browns have allowed 4 touchdowns in the last 3 games. And up until Monday night, Jonnu Smith was actually tied with Travis Kelce to lead all tight ends in touchdowns. Even with Jonnu's logic-defying volatility and target volume. I still don't understand it. He had no catches, no targets, actually, I don't think, this past week. But either way, I think this is a great spot for him. And considering the matchup, start him with confidence. I haven't seen 2 straight games where Jonnu Smith got shut out in targets. So
I absolutely would be starting him with confidence, and I'm going to be starting him with confidence. I think Jonnu Smith's got great opportunity to put up big points up against a bad Browns defense when it comes to covering the tight end position. But my next start of the week is actually going to be TJ Hawkinson going up against the Bears. If there's one thing the Bears don't do well on defense, it's cover the tight end position. They're 7th worst in the league against tight ends. They give up a lot of points there, and I think TJ Hawkinson, I mentioned how I don't like any Lions players moving forward. The one exception is TJ Hawkinson, and the reason it being is he consistently gets his 5-6 catches a game for about 50 yards, and he's got a really high chance of scoring. I think that TJ Hawkinson is one of those guys that you can trust as a premier tight end in a league where the tight end position is tough to come by in fantasy football, and I think TJ Hawkinson's a guy you can trust week in and week out from here on.
I agree. I really like TJ Hawkinson. Rest of the season. So, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's the one guy that I'm not worried about in that Lions offense right now.
Yeah. My next star is Mike Gesicki against Cincinnati. I just want to recap real quick from last week. Told you guys started Ingram because since he had by far the worst defense against tight ends over the previous 5 weeks, allowing 11.6 fantasy points per game during that span. That's against terrible tight ends in Harrison Bryant, Anthony Fisker, Eric Ebron, I guess, is okay. Trey Burton, not so
Eric
good.
Ebron, I guess, is okay.
Ingram ended up finishing with 129 yards receiving. Next man up is Mike Gesicki against his defense. And since Fitzpatrick has been under center, Gesicki has been second on the team in targets behind only Devontae Parker. Keep attacking this defense. Start Gesicki this week.
I agree with you 100% with the Gesicki. I jumped off the Gesicki train and to the point where I thought he was droppable with Tua under center. With Fitzpatrick under center, it's an entirely different ball game. He likes throwing to Gesicki a lot, and for good reason. He gives him reason to throw him the ball. So moving on to sits at tight end, I've got Dallas Goedert going up against Packers. The Packers defense is 5th best up against the tight end position, and the Eagles are just a total dumpster fire on offense, and it's become just a total nightmare, a clown show, a circus act, whatever you want to call it. It's not a good situation to the point where I'm starting to hear rumblings that Jalen Hurts is getting reps with the ones in practice right now. So that kind of tells you their confidence in Carson Wentz moving forward. Granted, it may be more of a package play type situation, but regardless, that means that there's less and less trust in Carson Wentz moving forward.
It makes me laugh because 2 of my starts last week, and I admitted out the gate that they were both really risky, was Carson Wentz and Derek Carr. Derek Carr got outperformed by Nathan Peterman, and now Jalen Hurts is threatening Carson Wentz's job after naming them both starts. That's how last week went for me. All right.
Wow, you had a bad week.
Any more starts from one to sits?
That was my sit.
Oh, shit. Yeah, that was shit. God damn it. I lost my train of thought. All right. My sit's Hunter Henry against New England.
That's my other one.
The Pats are a top 5 defense against tight ends in the NFL, only allowing 5 points per game. And that's with having faced the 3 best tight ends in the league, in Kelce, Kittle, and Andrews.
The law firm of Kelce, Kittle, and Andrews, eh?
They should be known as that.
The law firm of Kelce, Kittle, and Andrews?
Why haven't we called them that?
Well, it would have to be like... Never mind. No.
Well, they held Kelce 70 yards.
It's like when the Raiders had Cooper and Crabtree, and it was the law firm of Cooper, Carr, and Crabtree.
Or back in there, the Bengals law firm and Jarvis Green Ellis. It was all one guy, but it was.
If his nickname wasn't Counsel, then they missed a royal opportunity.
But yeah, so this Pats defense, they held Kelce to 70 yards, Andrews to 61 yards, Kittle to 55 yards. They kept all 3 out of the end zone. there's no reason to believe Hunter Henry will fare any better in this spot. So he's my stay of the week.
I sat Justin Herbert. I'm also sitting Hunter Henry. The Pats defense is no joke, and Hunter Henry's not going to have a fun time. Defenses to stream this week, there were a couple. I went with Packers going up against the Eagles. Like I said, Eagles offense is a dumpster fire, and they turn the ball over like crazy, and the Packers have an opportunity to make some plays there.
You know me. I like to try to go as cheap as possible on my defenses.
The Packers are 15th best, so I imagine they're pretty cheap.
I went Cincy in all 3 of my FanDuel leagues last week, and it paid nicely considering how much they cost. I can't believe I'm recommending this one, but it's 2020 and weird things have happened. So I guess it's just par for the course. I'm going to go Lions defense against Chicago.
You know, I looked at it and thought about it. I did.
Just hear me out, all right? So, for one, the Bears always is nothing to be afraid of. I think we can all agree on that. Trubisky got the start with Nick Foles out last week. He had 3 turnovers. Not sure if he starts again this week. I haven't heard anything about Nick Foles coming back. So if Trubisky starts, it'd be icing on the cake. Nick Foles hasn't been great either way, though. So,
I think he could start either one. They both suck.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So, but here's the thing. Lions just fired their head coach in Matt Patricia. A lot of the Lions' defensive woes were due to Patricia not putting his guys in positions to succeed and having them actually woefully out of position on nonsensical defensive packages. You go back to that Thanksgiving game, you'll see what I'm talking about. They put a linebacker on a running back who's lined up out wide running a streak route.
mean, they've been doing that all year. That's how Naheem Hines burned up for 2 touchdowns. Let's be real.
They left Will Fuller in single coverage, no safety help on more than one occasion. So, like, in all honesty, a new coach, I'm not going to say their defense is going to improve, but I would expect some different looks out there and at least a little bit more common sense. And just in general, if you throw out some different defensive looks, that's something the Bears can't game plan for, and they don't have the type of quarterbacks that can make the on-the-fly adjustments. This is a one-time spot start. Let me reiterate that. This is a one-time spot start where I think the circumstance might meet the matchup, and they'll be dirt cheap in DFS. Lions DST.
You know, there is something to be said about what you bring up, though, with the fact that it is somebody else entirely calling the shots with that defense in Corey Unlin. Now, he has been calling the shots a lot this year, but I know Matt Patricia's had his hand in that defense as well, and his reluctance to blitz the quarterback, and I think that changes this week. I wouldn't be all that surprised to see the Lions come out and blitz for a record amount of times in the last 2 seasons this upcoming week against the Bears.
Oh, you should. You should put pressure on Trubisky or Foles.
Absolutely.
Neither of them can handle it.
And the reason is because Corey Unlin will want to blitz, whereas Matt Patricia apparently did not, because that's not what we do here in 2020. Yeah. This is the NFL.
I can't believe I just recommended the Lions defense.
You know what? I don't hate it. I don't hate it. I looked at it. I'll be honest. But I'm like, I can't support anything with the Lions anymore right now.
You know what I did? I sat there. I'm like, I mean, all right, you know what? Let me type this out. And if it makes sense to me after I read it an hour later, then we'll go with it. You said you had a second one?
Bills against the 49ers. The 49ers offense, again, is another one that really just does not scare me in any way. And while the Bills are a top 10 defense, there just wasn't a lot of matchups I really love this week at the lower end defenses. That was, one of the lowish ones.
Yeah.
So maybe play it. They're going to be a little more expensive. Honestly, I'd rather save the money and go with the Lions over the Bills.
Yeah. Keep in mind, we record this before the new DFS prices and lineups get released. So we do go blind into the DSTs in terms of trying to think of who'd be cheaper and who won't be. So
we normally base it on who sucks and who doesn't.
Exactly.
And then we go on matchup.
I've noticed that like we've recommended defenses that end up being like a top 5 most expensive defense in the week, but like it's just based on we're guessing here.
It doesn't mean we were wrong, does it?
Yeah, it doesn't mean, yeah, I guess that means we picked the right defense. And they valued them accordingly. I can almost guarantee you the Lions will be cheap as hell.
I would sure hope so. I'll be honest with you. I think the Packers are going to be a pretty expensive defense this week. They'll probably be a top 8 expensive defense, somewhere around if I had to guess, probably the $4,300 to $4,500 range. Whereas the Lions, I can see being like $3,500 range.
Yep.
So there's some money right there.
$1,000 to save is a lot of money to spend.
I mean, that's upgrading from Kareem Hunt to Nick Chubb.
Yeah. There you go.
So
that's all I got for
That's
this week.
all I got as well. Thank you guys again for listening and hanging out with us. Hope you had a good time and hope you guys have a good upcoming week in fantasy. We hope for success for all, especially if you take our advice, because that usually means that we have success. Because, just to explain, we're not just throwing out random advice. We actually play a lot of the things we mention and talk about. If you looked at Andrew and I's lineups this week, they were damn near identical in a lot of ways, and that's probably why we suck so bad this week. So when he's good, I'm good. When I'm bad, he's bad. We run lineups very similar a lot, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that we do the show together. So
yeah. We're not feeding you bull. We actually do believe what we're saying. It's nonsensical. Yes. Some of it sometimes is,
and sometimes it's just pulling it out of our butts and hoping it hits. So, but again, guys, thank you again for listening. Follow us on Twitter at Real Fan Report. Thank you to Detroit Sports Podcast, and Andrew, thank you for joining me. We will catch you guys next week. Have a good one. Peace out.
Peace.